People always ask if I'm similar to my characters, and I could not be on the opposite end of the spectrum. Like someone asked me who would I fight if I had to fight anyone in the novel, and I told them that the only one I could possibly be is Meilin's younger brother, who's 5 years old.
We have K.X Song adding to our Sims household, and can you tell us about the character that you're going to be making?
Yes, so I'm making my main character from The Night Ends with Fire. Her name is Meilin, and she is the inspiration for a Mulan retelling if Mulan was not motivated out of filial piety, but rather out of her own selfish ambition.
All right, so let's jump into making her.
So many options. Okay, so she's pretty tan, lots of time fighting and training outside in the war.
So when did you know that you kind of wanted to play with the story of Mulan?
I had grown up loving Mulan as a kid. I had a VHS tape actually of the Disney animated version, and I watched it so many times that the tape actually broke and I had to request a new one. That looks pretty Asian, don't you think? Or
Yeah.
But yeah, so that was sort of the inspiration for how I fell in love with Mulan. But then as an adult, I was really wondering, like, does this feel realistic for a character who grew up in those very constrictive gender conventions of the time to be content to return to the ways of womanhood? And that's sort of when the idea for The Night Ends with Fire started forming. I am so amazed by all these options.
Yeah, like some of them are default, and then some of them are like custom content that you can download.
Oh, and you can even change the hair color.
And so since like
Damn.
you are writing a book, based on an existing tale, legend, lore, like what was creating a character for that like what did you know that you wanted to change, and what did you want to take from previous iterations?
Mm-hmm. So I based it off of Mulan and another book actually called Romance of the Three Kingdoms, which is a Chinese classic. It's one of the 4 great Chinese novels that almost every junior high kid has to read in China. And so in this series, it's such a great storyline of like war and like epic like political intrigue. The only issue that I had with it as a kid is that out of this cast of like 100+ characters, there's maybe 3 women, and the woman is either a shrew or like a useless damsel in distress. And so I wanted to also do a gender twist on that. Sorry, I'm getting distracted by all these hair options. And then for Mulan, there were so many different...
I think you should go with that one.
There were so many different variations of the Mulan ballad that I wanted to pay homage to. And what I was interested in is that in many of the Chinese versions as well as the Disney version too, she's always sort of motivated by this sense of like her goodness and her filial piety. And so I wanted to create this very flawed character where it wasn't pure intentions or sort of these like noble characteristics that are driving her journey forward as a hero, but rather a more like flawed state. I actually think this is good, but I was looking for like a ponytail or an updo sort of vibe.
I know that there's like, if you click on that little arrow there, you can sometimes just like categories.
Oh, athletic. All my like childhood video gaming instincts are coming out, and so I'm like becoming extremely. That's kind of pretty. Though it's not very realistic for the character. I'm like, do I dress her for me or for the actual character?
Are you a writer who you feel like characters take on a life of their own and they make decisions that you don't expect?
Very much so. People always ask if I'm similar to my characters, and I could not be on the opposite end of the spectrum. Like someone asked me who would I fight if I had to fight anyone in the novel, and I told them that the only one I could possibly be is Meilin's younger brother, who's 5 years old.
At least you know your weaknesses.
Exactly. I know my limitations. I'm there to write, not to fight.
Did you have to do like research for writing fighting, or was it something that you went into the book knowing?
I think that I just grew up playing video games and watching so much media that I sort of had a sense for how it would be portrayed on the page sense. And actually, I was doing a book talk in New York, and Chloe Gong asked me, like, how do you write your fight scenes? And because I guess I don't use a lot of I in my fight scenes, like I did this or I picked up the sword. And I was talking through my process in that sense, I think a big part for me is like imagining yourself in the shoes of this person. And I imagine that it would be so chaotic that you're not thinking about doing something, you're just reacting to all the like onslaught of sensory stimuli that's happening. And so that's sort of how I go about writing them, as opposed to in a very like clinical, scientific manner.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I know a lot of writers, like fight scenes are the bane of their existence.
For me, it's more so like emotional interiority, where I'm like, oh, do they have to think about their emotions? Okay, I'm just gonna go with the original. I'll just keep this one. This one is so pretty. I'll just stick with this one though, because the hairstyle is not historically accurate.
But yeah, beyond fighting, was there lots of like historical research you did?
There was a bit of reading up on Chinese mythology, but again, a lot of it was based upon the stories that I had heard as a kid already. And I think that I was so burned out from my debut, which required so much research and so many interviews that were conducted from the hours of like 12 a.m. to 2 a.m., given the time zone difference and the fact that I was writing the book in California, that I wanted to write something that was genuinely just like an escape from reality. And so in that sense, it didn't require that much research, and I wrote it really fast too for that reason.
How fast is fast for you?
So typically I think I would be a slow writer, and I have tried to do NaNoWriMo National Novel Writing Month.
Me too.
Maybe every single year. Oh, you're also a writer too?
I used to do a lot more writing in high school. I'm more of a visual media now.
Oh, cool. So I would say that every year in November, I would try and I would fail. And then 1 month arbitrarily in March, I happened to write 50K for The Night Ends with Fire. And so I finished the first draft of this in about 1.5 months. But normally I'm definitely not that fast.
Hoop earrings aren't historically accurate.
I guess not for someone disguised as a man in China.
Do you feel like it's helpful that so many people have the Disney Mulan as a point of entry, or does it frustrate you that that's like the first thing in people's minds?
I think it's helpful because I'm trying to subvert that expectation. And so if they don't even have the expectation, you can't really, subvert it in that sense. And so especially for Western readers, we all have sort of this baseline to draw from, and then we can go past that. And I don't remember who I was talking to, but I feel like early wave of feminism, and especially in media, is depicting women as main characters who are perfect heroines, who have no flaws, and have these noble qualities that make them worthy of being a hero that could take center stage. And now we're at this point where we're okay centering women who actually make a ton of mistakes and are very flawed characters, and they still deserve to take up space despite that.
I love that.
It's the whole women's rights are great, but women's wrongs are even better. See, I'm a little bit torn on if I should be making her in the army or in like book 2, essentially, where she has more like palace time. I think I might do book 2 vibes because they're more fun.
This is always like one of those menus that when I open it, I'm like, oh God.
I know. See, you don't actually expect lips to make such a big difference, but when they start changing, you're like, what is happening? And it goes to show that beauty is so subjective, because actually in ancient China, rosebud lips were considered the most attractive. So having a really small mouth that's like this wide, versus here in the US, you want the big, juicy, like this kind of vibe.
And it's all like, it changes with the
exactly.
times.
I think this is good, actually.
All right, should we move on to the clothes?
Yeah.
All right,
How
so
do I?
you kind of do like a swipe, zoom out.
Oh.
And then, yeah, you can
Nice.
also just like her fitness and body type level with
Okay.
those sliders. It's kind of like the figure. I think it's just like
Okay.
lagging a tiny bit.
Oh, okay, no. Wait, why? Yeah. How did this happen? I like how this is like your standard outfit. Like this is how you start.
I think that's perfect for infiltrating the army.
Oh, I can see your muscle tone now. Oh, dang, I see. Okay, but that's too much.
And was there a favorite part of what you got to write?
You know what? I put so many of my favorite things to write in the book that I can't choose one. And I think that's why, I just think writing is the funnest thing ever. And about, if people ask me, oh, would you rather do this or this? I just always want to be the one creating the world, because then you have so much agency and also choice in terms of what you throw in there. And so, especially for this book, I was purely writing it for myself, or my kid self. And so I just put in everything that I wanted to see. And one thing about a lot of Chinese dramas that I grew up watching is that there's so much angst and pining in these stories. And I'm sure you're like familiar with video games and anime and all that. Like you can see some of those tropes in there where there's a lot of like star-crossed, like forbidden love. And so I really wanted to lean into that. And then also I wanted a magic system with real consequences. So I think when I grew up, there were a lot of fantasy stories where characters would just get these immense powers, but never have to pay for them. And that sort of bothered me as a kid because it just did not mirror how our real world looks like, where, for example, if you have a wealthy billionaire who gives you, you know, X amount of money, they're going to expect something in return. Like there's always strings attached. And so it just didn't feel true to the societies I had experienced. So I wanted to basically make a magic system that has consequences on the main character and changes who she is both physically and emotionally, and then also have the magical beings who bequeath the magic systems, bequeath the magical powers, also sort of have their own devious agendas that may or may not align with our protagonists. What is this? Oh, it's giving Dragon Age.
I like how you're like, oh, I'm not that much of a gamer. Keep mentioning games.
So when I was a kid, I was the biggest nerd. But then you become an adult and you realize you have no time, which is kind of the saddest realization.
I feel like everyone who works in like publishing is a professional nerd. So.
That's so true.
But yeah, did you have a ride or die series when you were a kid?
So many. I was a big Alana by Tamara Pierce fan. That's like a series that came out like in the 90s or something. And I think also she's a big proponent of love triangles. And so that's also why I was like, a love triangle is mandatory in this book. You know, this kind of works. However, this is a bit too modern. How many authors do you have cosplay?
I don't think any I've encountered.
Have you ever cosplayed for Comic-Con?
Yes, I have.
What have you cosplayed as?
I feel like one of my favorite cosplays was when I did one from the game Transistor.
Ah.
But I have done Genshin cosplay before.
Wait, I feel like that's really hard.
Yeah, it's so many details.
Okay, this kind of works. So let's save this as a backup if we can't find anything else. This is Korean. Otherwise, it would be perfect. Oh, I like this better. Why are her hips
Yeah, if
not
you kind
hipping?
of like
Okay.
drag them in.
Okay, let's make this more Asian. Okay, I think that's better.
So you mentioned love triangle. What is her feeling on romance? Because I know a lot of like characters, especially when there's a love triangle, are kind of the ones who are like, I don't have time for romance.
Mm-hmm. I think for one is that she grew up incredibly sheltered. So a lot of the time when things are happening, she doesn't realize what's happening. And her parents are both extremely not present for her. And in the sense that her mom passed away when she's very young and her father is an addict and not a reliable source of help at all. And so in that sense, she has a lot of daddy issues. But also her love triangle in some ways, it's representing both her past and her future desires, in that one gives her that sense of stability and security that she craves that she didn't have as a kid. And the other one gives her that feeling of adventure and the unknown and risk and this feeling of uncertainty that she's also sort of leaning into as her ambition and her desire for power grows. And I have a friend, a very dear writer friend, who was like, please just don't add a love triangle because I hate them because they're not realistic. And I was like, why are they not realistic? And she was like, well, because no one likes two people at once. And I said, that's true, but haven't you ever wanted two very different things at the same time? And so I think especially for a character like Meilin, where her internal heart is so conflicted in terms of what she wants, it made sense to have that love triangle to illustrate her internal desires being expressed in this external framework. Wait, can I change her eyes a bit, actually? Yeah. They're looking a little sleepy. Honestly, I think even if given the choice to sort of craft your own appearance, it doesn't seem like you could be happy with whatever you choose. What's funny is on tour, I was on tour with David Yoon, and he does this thing where he asks Marcel Proust 32 questions to know someone. And he has the audience choose a random number, and then we'll ask the corresponding question. And the question he asked me is, what is the quality or trait of your physical appearance that you're most insecure about? He asked in front of like 50 people, you know?
Such a mean.
But like he couldn't choose the question. So I said my gray hairs because time is coming for me. These are very limited aspirations. I guess popularity.
And then like when you click on them, they're like subsets.
Interesting.
So many authors have like immediately gravitated towards deviance. I don't know what that says about.
Okay, let's do this. I do think that a lot of authors love to write dark characters because it's a way to sort of work through, it's almost like therapy but on the page, you know?
Yeah, I know, like I went to school for animation and they always said like animating is acting for people who like don't want to be seen.
Oh, interesting.
And I guess like writing is kind of doing things that you don't necessarily want to do yourself.
That's so true.
Yeah, the preferences are like,
oh, so I choose one aspiration.
Yep, and then like these three are the traits that kind of like decide how she acts.
Ah. Well, can you win in Sims or?
There's not really winning, but it's like, oh, if you're making her do something she doesn't want to do, then she'll have like a negative mood.
Mm-hmm.
And I like how ambitious is another popular character trait.
Would you say that you're ambitious?
No.
I feel like that's rare, very rare in this country, especially. Unflirty. Oh, that's so sad. I feel bad for her. Okay, let me give her this.
You're like, that's so sad. Let me do it.
I'm like, that's so sad because it describes her.
She's like, you did this to me. Do you ever feel bad for things that you put your characters through?
I do not. I sometimes feel bad for my readers, though, especially in writing a duology, where so many people have. So I just finished book 2. I actually sent it in to my editor. It's today Friday. I sent it into her today, this morning. I know, what is time anymore? And so I was basically done with book 2 by the time I was on tour. And so many readers would be coming up to me being like, you have to make sure she ends up with this character. And in my head, I'm like, she doesn't, because I already wrote the scene where it doesn't happen. But outwardly, I'm smiling and I'm like, you know, thank you for sharing your enthusiasm with me. I'm a bit too brutally honest. So I have like spoiled things on tour too when people pressure me too much.
I'm sure your publicity team's like, stop it.
I know. The issue, actually, this is one quality that we share because Meilin is a huge people pleaser. And so a big part of her internal arc as a main character is she wants to earn the respect of the men around her in the army. And that's why she goes to such lengths to save the kingdom during the war and be able to rescue her love interest and all of that. It's to be able to say that she can belong to this community of men. And not in the same exact way, but I definitely am a people pleaser as well. And that's something that I've had to work through. And so with a love triangle, like, because Meilin is someone who will end up with one person, you ultimately can't satisfy or please everyone. And that's sort of this dilemma that I've set up for myself in this. And that's why also when I'm meeting readers and they're like, you have to have her end up with X or Y, I'm like, I'm so sorry.
You're like, fan fiction is always there for you.
Very true. Perfectionist. I love these little dances.
She looks ready to take on the world.
That's sarcastic. That smile was a bit sarcastic.
We have Tamsin, who was.
Can I see?
Yeah, she's currently she's napping. That was Alexander Bracken's character.
Oh my gosh, I love the pants.
And then we have Isla, who's also asleep, who is Heather Walters' character.
Why is she so sad?
I know that she was having a lot of fear because she's scared of thunderstorms.
Aww.
And then something to make it more interesting, we created this like writer's block character, and they are just like very mean and cause problems.
Young adult, of course.
Meilin, watch
so happy for now, but I feel like if I leave her in this house for a bit longer, she'll end up sad, like Tamsin and.
They're not sad. They're sleeping.
Why do they look so unhappy though? Uncomfortable. Okay. Asleep. Oh, so now she's awake.
Yeah, and like something we've been like having authors kind of do is we have all these like rooms dedicated to building different skills. So like we've been like, oh, what skill would your character prioritize?
You need a gym for Meilin.
I mean, we have our little workout
perfect.
room.
Okay, send her there. What is she doing?
She's watching
Procrastinating?
TV.
Oh my goodness. What a procrastinator.
How do you think Meilin is going to do in this household?
I think she will do well because she's used to very turbulent household environments. And in comparison to having an abusive dad and kids that you have to take care of, this is sort of like, a vacation spot. So she's like basically at the beach right now, being here with like other emotionally stable characters. The Night Ends with Fire is a dark fantasy Mulan retelling inspired by the question of what does our ambition cost us? And it follows a Mulan character that is inspired by her own selfish ambition rather than filial piety, and includes all of my favorite tropes, including enemies to lovers, star-crossed romance, and the adventures and journeys that come from a war-torn kingdom trying to do battle with dragons and phoenixes.